Onboard Equipment 2025. What has changed? What will change? Let's take a look at the various details together. We've made quite a few videos about onboard equipment, but maybe this time I'll try to do it a bit differently. The rule is the same, it hasn't changed, but I'll give examples step by step. And the premise I want to make is that it doesn't depend on the type of boat you have or want to use, but on how many miles from the coast you want to sail. So if the boat is certified for that kind of navigation, you can go there. If the boat isn't made for that, you won't be able to go. Having said that, let's take a look at the differences between 3, 6 and 12 miles and the various distinctions that exist. Onboard equipment for sailing 3 miles from the coast. Let me clarify for beginners. It's not the coast you departed from, but the closest coast to you at your current location. So I can sail for 100 miles without any problem, but as long as I stay within 3 miles, I could even circumnavigate Italy without issue. 3 miles, which means all lakes are definitely included, and even Elba, with some calculations, can be included as well. Life jackets, one for each person on board, so every person must have one and not necessarily worn, but available on board for emergencies with at least 100 newtons of buoyancy. They must of course be approved for navigation within 3 miles from the coast, must have this 100 Newton reference, must have a whistle and a reflector, so this is what's required. You just need to check that they are certified. The life buoy ring, the actual life buoy orange one with a 30-meter floating line to red flares, commonly called rockets, and a smoke buoy, which is part of the flare kit. There are usually 3 pieces in the kit. Otherwise, you'll need to have all 3 items, 2 flares and a floating smoke buoy. The required navigation lights for night sailing, the black ball, which is used to indicate that you are at anchor, that you are stopped, and it should be hung up when you drop anchor and stop somewhere in a roadstead or in any case when you are stationary. This ball isn't a real ball, but rather 2 or 3 plastic plates that, when assembled, form a ball shape. The important thing is that it's visible and that it's that specific type of signal. This ball is only required for vessels larger than 7 meters, so for those with a certified length of over 7 meters. Boats with a lower certification are not required to have this ball within 3 nautical miles. A bell whistle is only mandatory for vessels over 12 meters. So generally, someone with a boat of that size will have equipment well beyond these requirements. But if you want to stay within 3 miles with an 11.5 meter boat, you don't need it. At 12.5 meters, you will. A bilge pump or a scoop to remove water from the bilge is mandatory. You must have something that can get water out of the boat, basically. A fire extinguisher is mandatory if you have a CE certified boat. The owner's manual specifies where it should be installed and what type of extinguisher must be on board. If you have a vessel or a boat that does not have a CE certificate, you will then refer to the tables. In fact, I'm reading them myself to avoid confusion specifically. Annex 5 of the official Gazette for recreational boats regarding the required onboard equipment. So it's in the official Gazette, which means what I'm reading is the law. That said, regarding fire extinguishers, going back to the topic of extinguishers depending on the type of power you have on board, you will need to have fire extinguishers of category 13, 21 or 34B to ensure you have sufficient extinguishing capacity to handle and put out any potential fires on board. Required onboard equipment within 6 nautical miles from the coast. Let's say you have an island 10 miles away from where you are. You can stay within the equipment requirements for up to 6 miles because you move 6 miles away from the coast toward this island, but you still have 4 miles left to reach the island. So basically you are 4 miles away from the mainland. So this means that the equipment required within 6 miles works well, even if there is a nearby coast or an island 10, 11, or even up to 12 miles away. To avoid repeating myself, I'll just say that obviously the farther I go from the coast, the greater the safety measures need to be and the more equipment I must have on board. So everything I mentioned within 3 miles is taken as a given and is necessary for navigation. In addition to what I've already said, I also need to add a luminous buoy for the life buoy, which when thrown must be able to float and light up to signal the life buoy in case of emergency when it has been thrown into the sea. The number of items in the flare kit is doubled, so it becomes 2 red hand flares, 2 red parachute flares, and 2 smoke buoys, making a total of 6 items instead of 3. Onboard equipment within 12 miles from the coast, so if the island is 22 miles away, the equipment is sufficient, because if I go 12, then 13 or 14, I will have less than 12 miles from the other side. So the 12 miles from the coast is always measured from the closest point to land, not from where I started. So let's take a look. Here, in addition, you need a coastal life raft, which is quite small compared to the life raft required for beyond 50 miles, but it must be on board and its capacity depends on the number of people. So if it's a 10-person boat, I must have a life raft that can hold 10 people and so on. The life jackets and safety harnesses must be of the 150 Newton type, which refers to their buoyancy compared to others that are smaller. The life jackets must also have a light that activates automatically when someone falls overboard, obviously while wearing the life jacket. The compass and its deviation tables for calculating the correct course, a clock, a table of visual day and night signals, a VHF radio for sailboats only, a deck safety harness with safety strap at least one on board is mandatory. For fire extinguishers, the rules for 3, 6 and 12 miles apply. I imagine that if you're dealing with onboard equipment for up to 50 miles or with no coastal limit, you're a captain who already knows these things by heart and certainly aren't here listening to me explain them. That said, what matters to me is to make you understand in the clearest and simplest way possible what safety equipment you need to have on board, not just because it's required by law, but above all for your own safety. Remember well that as long as nothing happens, everything seems fine. But it only takes one time for something to go wrong for you to regret not having complied with the legal requirements. The law regarding safety equipment has also been revised in the latest nautical code, and some perhaps unnecessary requirements have been removed. Real clarity has been brought to what is truly important to have on board for safety. For example, you will see that the boat hook is not mandatory, even though it's absolutely useful and necessary. However, in terms of safety, it's not required. So it's useful for you to have it, of course, but it's not required by law. You can even use a stick or make your own boat hook by hand if you want. It's up to you. That said, please make sure to follow the law. The official gazette contains all of this information written with tables that are clear and precise. You can't go wrong. Fair winds, and always keep an eye on the weather.